Well, first of all, thanks for everyone who joined. I can honestly tell you that when we created this, no idea we were going to get this number of people, and it's actually, it's really neat to see, to be able to have this number of people on here. Jen, our signature performance coach. I mean, it's just been. We're really happy. At the end of the day, we created this for you, the families, and to be able to produce something where it's a value to you, no different than we would help advise your kid, help guide your kid. Hopefully you guys can get something out of here with Jen and myself here today.
Mike said to me when we set this up that it'll be a nice little intimate setting with some of our parents, and which is totally my wheelhouse because I work one-on-one mostly. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no kidding. We're going to do an intimate Zoom session here. But it's great. I mean, it's delightful that you guys see something in this, and we can work as community. I mean, the reality is we're here to help each other, and hopefully you can take something away from here that helps you transition with your child on the journey that you're both taking. So that's the part of this that I kind of am excited about. We've done two. This will be cut up into two different sessions. We'll have one today, and I think it's on September 6th. We'll do the next one. And there's so much to pack in here. And hopefully by September 6th, you guys are going to have, your athletes will be hopefully in camp. I don't think main camps will be, the season will be started then, but we'll have the opportunity to kind of dive into some minutia maybe of the transition, that you guys are taking with the journey here with your kids. The journey that we're all on here with your kids is not normal, right? So let's just get that right out of the way. It's not a normal thing to have a 13, 14, 15-year-old, an elite level, leave home, change states, change provinces, play major junior, play junior A, whatever it might be. So I think as parents, you guys are tasked with something really difficult, and that's essentially allowing yourselves to help your kid move away from home for the first time. It might be the second or third year, but I don't think it gets any easier for people. And so that's why we brought Jen in. And I think you guys are going to get a lot from Jen. She's done an amazing job with our clients, our players, your sons. And my business coach actually said to me one time, I think you're missing an opportunity, and obviously we were, to bring Jen into the lives of the families. So with that, I'll introduce you guys to Jen, and she can take it away from here.
Thanks, Mike. So as Mike said, I am a performance coach, and essentially what that means is I help to move athletes, not just in isolation, but with their families from where they are to where they want to be. And the reality is this experience that you're having is a transition, not just for the athlete, but also for you. And one of the signatures for the work that I do is to meet an athlete exactly where they are. And sometimes where they are is not where they think that they are. That holds true for the families as well, particularly for the parents. I know for myself as a parent, I used to think, oh, I've got this, or yeah, I've been through something similar before. That is simply not the case here. In fact, admitting that you don't know exactly what's going on is one of the best starting points, because you're in a position of great honesty. And once you open up to that honesty, you'll start to let in the information that is vital to not only the success of your athlete, but the success for yourself as a parent supporting that athlete. And that part is really key, because for the vast majority of your experience as a parent with your kids, you have been a nurturer. You have been nurturing them in terms of what you feed them. You have been nurturing them by providing safe shelter. You have been nurturing them by providing opportunities for them. You have been providing so much. When they move into the types of choices that they're making now, moving away from home for hockey, joining tougher teams for hockey, adding in extra types of training, new ideas, deep self-work. There's a lot of things that you're bringing into them and into their lives. When you're doing that, you're opening up opportunities for them to become more and more and more self-sufficient. And as they're becoming more self-sufficient, your role is to shift from primary nurturer to primary supporter. And that is not what we think it is, because most of us assume that being a nurturer and being a supporter are the same thing, and they are not. And if we don't identify that difference, that is not a neutral experience. There's nothing neutral about that. Status quo is not neutral. In transition, there is no neutrality. You're either helping or you're hurting. It's one or the other. There is no ground where it's not going to have an impact or it's not going to have an effect. So that I'll keep it status quo when I already know how to do all of this is not neutral. It will move into this is actually going to do some harm. And that is a hard pill to swallow. It is. I experienced that myself. You can find my story on my website, but that not only as a parent, but also as an athlete myself, and the neutrality of or what my parents perceived as neutrality within their experience actually worked against me as an athlete. So as a coach, I became everything that I needed that I didn't get as an athlete, and that's really the basis of the coaching that I do. So that's just a little bit of what my story is. But how this affects you is truly acknowledging that you are in a place of transition as well. And for some, that includes grieving the loss of the family dynamic that you had before this moment. That really matters, and it's uncomfortable. It is incredibly uncomfortable. However, one of the things that I offer up to the athletes, and I also offer it up to the families, and it's really neat when both are going through it at the same time, but in your own way. And that is, you are going to find a great deal of wisdom, and you're going to find a great deal of growth within the discomfort. You've just got to let yourself be uncomfortable for a hot minute. That is going to be really key. And this is one of those, from my coaching perspective, a sorry, not sorry situation. It's because the payoff is huge. It's uncomfortable now, yet when you see your athlete son move into a place where they carry your family values into a very high pressure environment, the amount of pride that you will have in what they are becoming is immense. Yet it will only happen if we allow them to do it. It will only happen if we allow the time and the space for them to make that transition. And that time and space is what's going to be most uncomfortable for you. When we go into that place of discomfort, it's because the nurturer in us wants to jump in and feed them, hold them, guide them, say something to them, give them a blanket, give them a jacket, give them a new pair of socks, give them a new pair of skates, get on board with them about everything that they're saying about their roommate, about their coach, about the billet family, you name it, all of those things, the nurturer in us is going to want to jump in and do all the things, not because there's anything wrong with you, it's simply a habit. That is it. And I don't know if any of you have listened to any of James Clear's work, the Atomic Habits book. It's we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our habits. Being a nurturer is the most profound habit that we have as parents. And when we go through that transition into allowing our athlete sons to become self-sufficient, we need to go through that very uncomfortable transition of nurturer to supporter. So,
well, when Jen and I were talking, because Jen and I could talk for hours about this stuff, but it was really apparent that the nurturer versus the supporting piece for me as the agent, as the advisor, was really important for me to make the distinction, because I actually had never thought about it. But I don't have kids, so I'm not a subject matter expert here. But I do have, we've got lots of kids that call and need advice and guidance. But I think it's a really important thing to maybe expand on, Jen. When a family's feeling that way, and you're working with their child, what are some of the things that they go through, right? What are they looking for in that transition that they're taking?
The athlete?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to share a little bit with you. That's a great question, actually. They want the challenge. Okay, young men do not get into hockey unless they are hardwired for facing challenges and loving every second of it, even when it's uncomfortable. They love it. And if we take that away from them in any way, shape, or form, we are suppressing those abilities within them to meet those challenges, even though our intentions are so good. And one of the reasons is because we often, as parents, will interpret their struggle as suffering. And that's a misinterpretation. They are hardwired to seek out struggle. They will take on the struggle of getting up at ungodly hours to go to the gym, to go to the rink, to go into a cold place, to put knives on their feet and sticks in their hands and chase a little black disc around. And in goalies' cases, to have them beat off their heads. And they love it. And the reason that they love it is because this new thing in them awakens in the presence of that struggle. If we interpret that struggle as suffering, we will do everything we can to take the suffering away. But in these cases, we will sometimes take the struggle away. And within that struggle is the seed of their growth. And they need that. It's a requirement for growth, is for them to struggle. So being able to know the difference between struggle and suffering is quite key as a parent. But I don't know if somebody had a question there or not, but
I've got a question. How do you decide what is struggle and what is suffering? Because the truth is sometimes it is suffering. So I really hear you and I'm on board with you. And there's been times in our hockey athletes' life where they've needed us to step in because the hockey culture world is not always a friendly, supportive place, and it is suffering. So I'm just curious, because I'm all on board with letting them figure it out, and so I'm just curious from your point of view, how do you identify when it's suffering and when it's struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. What was your name?
Laura North.
Oh, hi, Laura. Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And every athlete is going to be different in this. So one of the main markers between struggle and suffering is allowing them to talk through, let's say if they're bringing something up, for instance, that it could be there's something going on with the food at their billet house. I don't like the food.
We've never heard that before, have we?
So that's a struggle. That is definitely a struggle. And if usually it is a struggle. Now we can actually provide support through that, not necessarily by sending the massive care package or having skip the dishes sent to them every day on the down low. But what you can do is ask them, what is it that you need that you're not getting? And allow them to become their own problem solver. Allow them to think through that a little bit themselves, and give them time to create their own response. Because oftentimes what will happen is we will ask that question, and because there's a pause or there's a delay, we interpret that as, oh my goodness, they don't know how to do this. And then we'll fill in the gap for them. That's the nurturer jumping in. However, if you just pause long enough and even say, like, do you need some time to think about it? And then if they can't provide a response, then chances are they are suffering a bit, and the suffering is actually causing a disconnect. They're unable to even move into problem solving mode. What we do need to do is give them time. Give them a little bit of time to build the resilience to the question itself, hear the question, and allow it not just to formulate in their head, but also to integrate into their body. Because as athletes, their body is a genius that has been solving complex problems at very high rates of speed for quite a long period of time. So if we're expecting a quick answer as soon as we ask the question, we're not allowing the part of them that knows how to solve problems to take part in the conversation. So I personally, I will give them time, and I will watch and see. And I will look for body language as well. So what is it that you need? Now, the first thing that will come out is, I don't know. And then it's like, well, if you did know, let's consult with your physical body. What does it feel like you're missing right now? And give them a moment, and they will come up with something. It is our responsibility as their parent to sit in the discomfort with them, but not to take the discomfort away. Now, if it stays long standing, and when I say long standing, like if it's not just a complaint, but you start to see in the food situation where they're starting to perseverate or hyper focus on food, then that's when we know that there's a problem, that there is an issue. And in that case, we can help them not necessarily by providing all the food for them, but help them to formulate the language that they need to advocate on their behalf. And it might not necessarily be directly to the billet family if that's the situation, but it may be to the person who is in charge of billeting. They might not have even known that there is somebody who is there to be an advocate for the athlete in their billet situation. Because sometimes I get it, that jump to the family themselves can be incredibly uncomfortable, and so much so that it's debilitating. But the idea of knowing who their advocate is, where do you find the helpers when there's a crisis, and knowing who those helpers are. So now we have provided them with an access point to the people who are an extension of us. And those advocates within teams and with academies, if that's the case, or prep schools, there are people who are in that role who are not there separate and apart from us, but they are there as an extension of us as a parent. That's what their role is. So that's one of the ways that we can guide that. Does that answer your question, Laura?
Yeah, a little bit. Yep, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we hear it all, right? So oftentimes what will happen more is they'll usually come to us, and then that's when we make the introduction to Jen or whatnot. But I think the important thing that what you're trying to get through is to let there be pause in between when they come to you with the issue, sit in the uncomfortable space for a little bit, and then see if something else comes from that. And then you move into whether that, identifying whether that's a nurture versus support.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. Mike had asked a question a little while ago about what is coming from the athletes. And I'll provide a couple of examples here. One of them, I was having a conversation with an athlete yesterday in their preparation to go to a junior school or a junior program. And he's really excited about it. One of the things that he's most excited about is the independence. And he is grateful for everything that has been provided for him, yet he is longing for the space. And one of the things that I had helped him to identify was that it's not about throwing out everything from your past or throwing out everything that your family has provided for you. It's actually that he knows that he has his own voice, yet the rhythm of his voice being delivered is very different than that of his parents. And that is something that I witnessed. So the timing that he has when he's receiving a question and then formulating a response. Well, first there's the receive the question, understand the question, then formulate a response. And his responses, not only the words that he used to deliver it, but also the rhythm that he delivered it in and the timing was so different from that of his family. And yet he formulated very thoughtful, very thorough, very in-depth responses. And they were so unique to him that they facilitated the work that he and I do. Now, in contrast, I was in the initial call with the family as a whole. And when I would ask a question, he would begin to respond. And out of an abundance of care, the parent jumped in and said, is it okay if I fill in some more of this for you? And his reaction to it was like, you could tell he's like, this has happened over, yeah, sure, whatever. Like that's what always happens kind of thing. And they filled it in, and mainly just because the timing and the way and the rhythm that they deliver their information is different. And when he and I were finally on a call one-on-one, that rhythm of his I identified right away, and I said, Michelle, you have a very unique voice, and I said, and I want to hear it. And whatever period of time it takes you to share what it is that you have to say, or share what it is that you want to have heard in your unique voice, we will give you that time. That in him is actually a key marker of what I refer to as a bottom-up athlete. He feels things in his body first, and it takes a little while to give those feelings a voice. And the level of relief and ease that I saw in him from that experience was remarkable. The next thing you know, we're in conversation, like full, fluid, reciprocal conversation. And he brightened up. All of a sudden, all the markers of confidence started to show up. His excitement and enthusiasm for the game was all there. His awareness of the challenges that he's going to face was there, at the same time, knowing that he had the resilience to be able to meet those. All of that showed up, rather than the I don't know typical responses that we get to challenging questions.
And from an agent's perspective, dealing with, say, the National Hockey League, or even just in college hockey, but specifically the NHL, the term that I've heard most here in the last 2 years, 3 years, is he a problem solver, right? And they're trying to figure out, is that player able to solve, they'll call it, can he solve his stick? Can he solve the wall? Can he solve? And Jen and I had a really interesting conversation on that. It's just, as a young athlete, being given the space to solve earlier. And it has nothing to do with hockey, but it's just giving yourself the ability, or giving them the ability, to make that read on their own. It may not be the right response, but over time, I think the read and react, we call it, but the problem-solving abilities on the ice get better once the parents just give them a little bit of space to make that adjustment.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's a skill set.
Yeah.
Problem solving is a skill. It's not one that just magically appears for them. It is something that requires support throughout their whole playing career, their whole playing experience, and throughout the rest of their lives. And the way that they solve problems will evolve and mature as long as it is allowed to evolve and mature. And some of those earlier stages of problem solving is, who is my best support to help me to solve this problem? That can be one of them. And then eventually they start to follow some of the examples that have been shared with them in problem solving, and then they start to do it for themselves. So there is an evolution of problem solving. And that's one of the biggest challenges for parents is that our kids will change so rapidly. And a skill set that really worked for us as a parent at a certain age and stage has been outgrown. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't effective and that it wasn't useful. It's just that it has served its purpose, and now it's going to go through its next evolution. Problem solving is a lot like that. And it is essential.
And at every level, it's going to get faster, quicker, sharper, and get to the national level, it's going to be sharp. It's going to be instantaneous. But I think there's a level of talent, obviously, that's there as well. But I think a lot of it has to do with just being comfortable thinking on your feet.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take a moment here, because we introduced an idea and we threw a lot of information at you at a moment, just really quickly, and filled in some gaps. But even the concept right now of your athletes, your son going through a transition, but you also going through a transition, and sitting in that space of disruption. Your lives have been disrupted. That's a reality. And along with that disruption, there are going to be feelings that come along with it. And I'm kind of curious about what some of those feelings are that are going on with parents. And even if you could put those into the chat, that would be amazing, because we can very briefly address some of those feelings that are happening. Because if you can tell, how many people got here? 80, like 79, 80. You're not alone in this. Like, there's a whole community of people here who are experiencing this transition in one way, shape, or form. And there's a lot of feelings that go along with it. Some of it, even from us, from a parental standpoint, is the fear of missing out. Like, I'm going to miss out on all of these things that are happening with my kid, kind of like when we drop them off at kindergarten, and they're going to be learning something without us being there. Like, why does this perfect stranger get to witness this and I don't? That kind of thing. So there's that fear of missing out. What's another one?
One on the chat, and this one definitely I hear lots of, and that's being lonely. And I get it, right? At dinner time conversations, you guys are planning all your vacations around hockey and the kids. And I think at a certain point in hockey, and I think it's a little bit archaic, but basically hockey tells you no more talking. You have advisors. We don't want to hear from you, for the most part, unless it's about billeting or whatever. But I feel as if, you've been such a huge support piece throughout, and then all of a sudden it's like taboo to have anything come from the parents. They're labeled a problem, right? And so I think that probably the loneliness could come from that too. I mean, yes, they're physically not there, but the fact is, like, you've lost all, well, it feels like you probably lost all control over anything that might happen.
This is, and I am curious, because there's the loneliness piece, there's the sense of one's own loneliness, but there's also the worry that our son is going to be lonely as well. But when it comes to our own, one thing that I want to identify with you as parents is that sense of loneliness is not simply an emotion, and it is not simply a thought process. It is a physical felt experience. Your nervous system has adapted to the rhythms, as Mike was pointing out, of a life with this person close by, in proximity, and you moving around in certain ways that has been an adaptation to them. So when they're not in the house with you, or the rink that you're going to drive to see their games is not close enough for you to go to, you are physically feeling that. That is a function of the nervous system, and even the way that your heart is beating, the way that your lungs are breathing, the way that you're digesting food, that is all going through a transition and an adaptation. All of it is. And one of the best pieces of advice that I can offer you, and this is something that I presented to an NHL mom, actually. And I had the pleasure of working with her son from the time that he was 16 playing junior hockey right up into his NHL years, and still do. Yet I've probably spent as much time with her as I did with him. And it was to help her transition through this, because if she didn't go through the transition, her responses to his career was starting to be actually harmful to his career. And that was a reality. So she needed to satisfy the need to keep moving in ways that help to regulate her nervous system. And that is what all of us need when we go through those stages of loneliness, is to regulate the nervous system. And I'm not saying go and do a yoga class or whatever it may be. Like, that might be your thing. It could be anything that where you're getting out for a walk. It's not just about getting out for a walk, but walk in a slightly different direction. Go out for a walk and then deviate into the trees for a little while. Your nervous system will pick up information from a natural setting that is new and somewhat dynamic in a way that will satisfy those regulation needs. It is a thing that works. And for this NHL mom, she had her walking space, and for a while, she was actually going for her walks and then taking pictures of herself with the tree that she would hang out with. And she said, this seems crazy, but it actually works. She's like, yes, I still miss him. And yet at the same time, I don't feel as charged up and anxious as I used to. And that meant that she was not communicating with her son in an anxious way, i.e., the moment that his game is over, sending him a text. Having on the ready all of the feedback that she was going to give him on his game. Like, that was the kind of stuff that she was doing. And that meant that he was he was feeling anxious about satisfying her loneliness because he felt responsible for that, which meant that he wasn't connecting with his teammates post-competition, which was one of the main issues with what was happening in his career. Is he was playing a great game in isolation, but wasn't reading the cues of his teammates, which meant that he started getting moved down the lines from like second line to fourth. That's the cost of this. When she started going through the adaptation and adjusted her needs for her nervous system, it's like he could feel it even though she didn't tell him about it. And their communication shifted. She became a more regulated place to land. And he started going out more with his teammates. He started understanding their biorhythms more, and he actually started contributing more. His minutes during playoffs that year, I think that was 2019. That was right before COVID. So 2019 playoffs. And his minutes went from 6 minutes to 14 minutes during playoffs alone. And that all happened with the shift of what was going on. That was the impact of this.
The other ones that are there, similar thing, family dynamics, siblings. Yeah, I mean, siblings are affected too. Super excited, but sad I've lost them. Same thing. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to address so we're going to talk quite a bit about communication in a future event because it's a really big body of work. Communication is so important, and I love words, obviously, because I've already said a lot of them. Probably exceed my limit. However, here I feel for you. Yes, you are experiencing loss, but it's not loss of the person. And I want to be really clear about that. Because if our kids hear us say things like, I've lost you, they're going to try to make that pain go away sometime, or they may try to avoid being in the presence of that discomfort. So watch for that. You haven't lost them. What has changed is the dynamic. And so what is going to happen is you have an opportunity to meet a new version of the person that you created. They are going to surprise you in ways that far exceed your expectations because they're moving into the realm of the unknown. And they're going to take all of these values, core values that were established in your family. They're going to take all of these experiences and all of this nurturing that you have provided, and they're going to have it put under a great deal of pressure, and they're going to create something new out of it. So yes, there is going to be a distance between you. However, you are going to gain a much more evolved version of them. And you will need to have a little bit of support and help and do some work to adjust that feeling of I've lost them to I'm allowing them to grow, and they'll grow more towards me. Right now it's uncomfortable and it hurts. That's true. That is 100% true. I never took that away. The language of loss, though, needs to go through an adjustment as well. That is a requirement.
But Jen, so let's talk about this quick. So when I go through the journey with an athlete, typically 14, 15 years old, it changes dramatically. And the families often will come to me or any of our agents and say, you know, I've got a message. They won't listen. I've got a message. Could you try to, in your own words, get it through to them and help me get this message through, because they're just not listening. Part of that is probably just trying to become your own man, growing into, you know, mom, dad, I got it. You know, I'm cooler than you think I am. And, or, you know, but the other part of it too is just the way that maybe the parents are communicating is maybe still from like a prior moment, right? From when they were younger.
Yeah, this is so important. Yes, that transformation of language is key. So the first question is, what has been the timing of it? Because here's the interesting thing. If we send a message to our kids and we don't get a response, if we send another one, it's like starting all over again. So that they might have been right on the cusp of getting ready to respond, but then we send another one and then it starts the whole process again. I just want you to know that is what happens under those circumstances. So the rhythm or the timing that we're accustomed to their responses is going to change. It has changed. Now, if there is a necessity for you to receive a response, then make sure that you let them know that ahead of time, and not based on what is making you uncomfortable. Like, I worry about you, I think that something bad has happened. Like, when we start sending those messages to them, they do not know how to respond to that. They don't know which one to respond to. Is it the initial question, or is it the fact that you think something bad happened to them? And that they don't know how to fill that gap. That's actually a developmental thing. They don't know how to ease that pressure and that pain for you. And it's at the same time as solving the problems of what's going on the ice, what's going on with team dynamics, what's going on with their coach, what's going on in their billet family, what's going on with them trying to figure out where the bathrooms are in this arena that they're playing in, what's going on with the fact that the person that they drive to the rink with always shows up late. They've got all of that going on. And now they have this other problem of needing to respond to somebody else's discomfort. And I'll leave it at the discomfort thing. So what's going to be important for us, like for somebody like me and somebody like Mike, is we are going to be able to receive that information from you. However, we may not deliver it in the same way that you are right now. And like Mike said, the way that it's delivered may have been incredibly functional for a former version of them. They are becoming an evolved version of themselves. They are becoming that. And a part of them will often feel reminded of a smaller, younger, weaker, and weaker, I don't mean like mentally weak or whatever, I just mean not as physically capable version of themselves. So that's one of the things that we need to be aware of, is what is the message signaling to them? Is it signaling that, hey, I trust your ability to adapt to all of this stuff that's going on. I trust, and time is a signature of trust. I trust your ability to do this. Now, I need one piece of information. And you can let them know why. Like I need to know what the name of like a teacher that you have, because in order to move this forward in a timely manner. It could be something like that. I'm just kind of going off the cuff here. So it's one of those things, is be specific about it, and then let them know even the time frame of when that needs to be delivered. So there's that kind of thing. Now, this is a bit of a general question too, right? Like about delivering information. So it depends on what that information is. And I had an athlete that I've been working with, and I make mistakes, and we had a fantastic training session, and then I let him know that part of his evolution, part of his maturing, including one of his parents in the communication. And I swear it looked like the blood drained out of his body. So my idea of inclusion was simply let her know what time your practice is at. His idea of inclusion was, she needs to know absolutely everything that's going on with me. And he was so overwhelmed by it that it drained him of all of his energy. And we had to spend the next 25 minutes rebuilding that. And it was all done physically. We had to go right to his body and rebuild his capacity, because that piece of information was a lot. Like because not from my intention was to, okay, he can experience this level of growth. That was my intention. But the way that it was received was completely different. And he received it like a much younger and less capable version of himself. And that's what we've got to be aware of. So as the supporters, we need to make our language match what they are becoming and everything that they're moving into. And that does take work. It is not an easy thing. I feel for all of you, what you've got yourself involved in it's work. Yet once you make that transition, it becomes an evolution of your entire family. Does that answer your question?
It makes sense. Yeah, that answers my question. Why don't we go over how you build trust and the difference between that and trustworthiness?
Yeah. So transition is the first T that we're focusing on. That you are going through a transition as well as them, and there is no neutral in that transition. You're either helping or hurting, and that's a sorry not sorry situation. But the payoff at the end is a much more self-sufficient and very, very capable athlete and person. The next T is trust, and that's a word that comes up a lot. And what I hear from many parents is, I feel like my kid doesn't trust me to be involved in the hockey stuff, or doesn't trust me the way that they used to. That's one thing that we hear. But then there's the piece where we want our athlete son to trust themselves and to trust the process. Do you want to say something about that?
It's probably my least favorite word or phrase in hockey is trust the process, because we've never defined what the process is for anyone. I guess that's the basis of this conversation and the series that we created was, what is the process? What are the tools that we need as families, as parents, as agents, as advisors to help the athletes through? And that's where Jen's expertise comes in. But what I see, and Jen, you can talk to it, is I feel as if there's been a trust built with the child and the family through the formative years, and then let's call it competitive hockey really starts, the Bantam age group, whatever we call it now, U15. And it's at that point that different people come into the athlete's life that have subject matter expertise. So that would be an agent to advocate, to provide access for that player, an advantage for that player. It's a skating coach, mental coach, it's GM coach, whatever it might be. There's a number of people that surround your athlete with an expertise. And I feel, and I don't know how this is just the way I see it. When the athlete starts to get involved into that area, the families at some point start to feel a little bit out of the loop, a little bit helpless. Oh boy, like this is a world we don't really know that well. And they're just starting to take off like a rocket ship with people around them. So why don't you just kind of off that piece, just fill in the blanks for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two things at play here when it comes to trust. There is our athlete, son or daughter, needs us to trust them to be resilient enough to meet the pressures of what they are embarking on. They need that. They don't need us to declare that we trust them. They need us to provide evidence of that trust that we have in them. And time is often one of those markers of us trusting them. And us being okay with that change of timing that it takes for us to see that they know that we trust them because they've done the thing that they said that they're going to do, or they've done the thing that you set out as a family. Trust the timing that it's going to happen. So that time lag is one of the markers of us trusting them. So if we send them a text and then the response doesn't come back in our timing, so we send them another one, that sending another one is often indicative of to them, not necessarily to you. That's not your intention. However, how they interpret it is they didn't trust me to do this thing. So they need to know that we trust them. And again, trust has some pillars, so I'm going to point those out here in a moment. The other piece, and this is a lot, is we need to be trustworthy as parents. And where we start with that is ensuring that our family values can withstand the pressure of this new level of competition, all of the social media, all of the things that other people are doing, all the things that we think that our kid might be missing out on, all of the stuff that has now got them in the public eye. Can our personal value system withstand the pressure of that? And when we as parents uphold those values, it could be of kindness, it could be of generosity, it could be of not worrying what other people think about us. Whatever those family values are, our athlete sons and daughters need to know that those values can withstand the pressure of all those other things that are being brought into this. And that is way harder than we think it's going to be, significantly harder, especially if we think that somebody else is gaining an advantage. And if our family values of integrity, of honesty, whatever it may be, if those break down under the pressure of feeling like somebody else is gaining an advantage, that will erode trust, because it eroded the value. And that is such a hard pill to follow at times. And I say this like almost shaking, because I went through it with my own daughter, going off to university, like, and other kids getting scholarships and all of these other things. And, you know, the not worrying what other people think, for instance, that this is a really key example. And we have access to what everybody thinks all the time. All you have to do is turn on one form of social media and you will see all of that right here, right now. So our access to what other people think is far greater and far more rapid and far more easily accessible than it ever was before. So that's a really important thing, and we'll touch on the social media stuff at another time. But so can our value of not being overly influenced by what other people think, not just what they think negatively about us, but also what they think in excess about us, the positive stuff, because that gets in the way as well. And in fact, one of the things that I've seen happen, and I've had to really dial some young athletes, especially the 15-year-olds, this is where I see it the most, is 15 is around the age where they start getting approached by scouts and agents, and somebody puts something about them on Twitter, and people know things about them that they don't even know who that person is, but they're writing things about them. And here is this 15-year-old now learning that all these people are watching them.
Forming hierarchies.
Absolutely. So, like, saying things about them, even really, really good things. And here's what happens under that kind of pressure is they'll start to perform, trying to maintain that level of attention and trying to impress those people that have never had to step on the ice and do the thing that we are doing right now. So can that value of being intrinsically motivated, playing for the love of the game, not being overly influenced by what other people think, can that withstand the pressure of this new evolution? And if we as a family member are sending tweets to our kid, hey, so-and-so said this about you. Oh, did you see this thing? Hey, did you see what this person said about you? If we're doing that, we have just eroded that family value. That's what happened. Now, here's the deal. This is not a character defamation thing that's going on here. We are not telling you that you're wrong or bad. What we're telling you is this is not what you thought it was going to be. This transition is not what you thought it was going to be. Because what we think it is and what it actually is changes day by day. It is always, always changing because it's a sport, and the sport is dynamic. It is always shifting and changing. That is a thing that happens. What is required to maintain a sense of self-trust and a sense of trustworthiness is that we maintain stability within our family values or personal values, if that's what it might be. And how do you do that? And as much as we think sending all this information to our kids about what somebody else said about them to pump them up or make them feel better, the value needs to be of greater, that family value needs to be more solid in their DNA. It needs to be more solid in their experience than those thoughts from other people. And we have to be trustworthy in that.
And just to finish that point, in my time in 15 years of doing this, but I've been in hockey 25 years, what I've really noticed exactly that is hockey's, you get externally validated all the time. Externally validated. You were good. No, you weren't good. That's a bad shift. That's a great shift. Good job, Jimmy. And we're telling the kids all the time what they are. And I get there's part of that is guidance, part of that is development. But at a certain point, you need to understand as an athlete internally, who am I? And I'll often ask the players, they'll say, how do you think I played? I go, how do you think you played? Because my opinion is just one thing. It's just one person's opinion. But if you don't have a really strong self-identity and understand what makes you the best hockey player possible on that certain night, then I don't think we've gotten anywhere. So I think that it's really important what Jen's saying, just in terms of as they grow, and we're expecting a lot out of these kids quickly, right? By the time you're 19 year old, right? So we're expecting a lot out of these kids to understand who they are. So just to be able to kind of, move around them in different ways and just allow them to start to understand, hey, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, through the modeling of the parent, I think is really key. Yeah. Why don't we hit on some of the trust factors? Because we've got
absolutely.
5 minutes, and maybe we could stay on for like another 10 for quick Q&A.
Absolutely. So what we've established is three pillars of trust, and they're really quite simple. But the key to all of them is evidence. Evidence is what gives a foundation to trust. So it is evidence of care, evidence of commitment, and evidence of consistency. We can make a declaration of care, but particularly for athletes, if there's no evidence of that care, they don't trust it. Many people say all kinds of things, but they don't provide the evidence for it. And in my line of work, I am like an evidence junkie, and help those athletes provide that evidence for themselves and go and seek it. That's what we do. Now, when it comes to care, one thing to understand is caring and worrying are not the same thing. And most of us think that they are. They're not too far off from one another. And this is that you're either helping or hurting. Care has a series of actions that are associated with it. So when an athlete cares about their performance, they will go out and focus on their first 3 steps. They will go out and focus on putting value on routine plays or routine saves if they're a goalie. That is the evidence of care. When it turns into worry is when the care has gone out of balance and they've moved into a place where it's future-based or it's somebody else based. What is so-and-so going to think about that performance? That's not them caring about their performance. That is them worrying about their performance. So that comes from us too. Our athletes need evidence of care. The other one is evidence of a commitment. So let's say that you committed to your son as they go into this new experience, that I'm going to step back. I'm here for you and I'll be a support. I'm going to allow your coach to do the coaching. I'd love to hear about it whenever you want to talk about it, but I'm going to allow that to happen. Evidence of commitment is when they have practice, and that this part is important. When they have practice, let them go to practice and you go and do something else. That is evidence of commitment to that statement that you made. Because
why?
Because our young people are preconditioned up to this point to value what you say and what you think more than anybody else. And when they're on the ice at practice, they are supposed to be learning new things. And we all say to our athletes, I want 100% of your focus and attention to be on what's going on in that practice session. Your presence there alone means that attention is divided. And that is not because you told them that they have to listen to you or anything like that. They have developed the habit of that throughout their entire lives up to this point. It's not a bad thing. It simply is a thing. It's structured right into the way that our habits work. So our commitment to allowing that to happen is like that. You're going to let them go to practice, and then they can fill you in on stuff later on. But commitment means you're going to do it, even if in the moment there is no guarantee of the outcome that you want. That is commitment. they don't get the outcome that you want after that first practice, oh my God, the practice sucked, I'm showing up for the next one. That is not commitment. You can help them build the resilience so that they can receive more during those practices, but you still let them be the one that shows up, even if they're struggling with it, even if they're struggling. Does that answer that question?
Yeah.
For you?
Yeah.
Because they are preconditioned to listen to you. And that's a good thing. So that's why we shouldn't be there. However, when it's time for them to perform, performance and practice are not the same thing. Performance is for general consumption. Performance is what you want everybody to show up for. All the games, like even a scrimmage at practice is okay, actually. Like that's kind of towing the line a little bit, but it's like that when it comes to games and whatnot, like every single athlete that I've ever worked with, really actually like it when people are there watching.
Yeah. So, and the caveat is, I mean, of course, if you live in a different province, different state, you go see your athlete, your kid for a week or whatever, you go to 3 or 4 practices because you're there for a week. That's a whole different thing. I think you're talking on a day-to-day basis coming in and yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then, so first 2 pillars are obviously that evidence of care, evidence of commitment, and then the evidence of consistency. And, because consistency is the marker of commitment. That is tough. So out of everything that we've shared, if you should say, okay, I really want to do this, don't try to do all of it. Being consistent with everything all at once you're setting yourself up for failure. Choose one area where you're going to be absolutely consistent, and you're willing to meet the discomfort, even when it's under pressure. So it could be a consistency with allowing them the time that they need to respond to the new stimulus around them, to respond to the new environment that they're in. Allowing time might be the thing that you are consistent with. That is what will build their trust in you as well. Is you told them that you were going to do something and you did it, and you did it again and again and again and again. That's actually the marker for their success as well, is they show up for practice again and again and again and again, even though there's no guarantee of the desired outcome. They just keep showing up. So you are actually modeling for them the very skill set that you want them to develop while they're going through this whole hockey experience. Because the reality is our kids are watching us. They cannot help themselves. They're watching what we do, how we do it, and they're the first ones to call us out on it if we don't do the thing that we said that they should be doing. We all know that they do that. So it's one of those, oh God, that really hurts. And yes, you're right about that. And we make the adjustment.
Okay, we're an hour in. I think that's good. I think we hit our word quota. Guys, I really appreciate everyone showing up. I think this is really good. We'll stay on for an extra 5-10 minutes. If there's questions, you can unmute yourself. You can throw it in the chat. I'll start with one of them that came in already. And I'll admit this person. And that says, what role is a parent, or what is the role of a parent in communication with junior coaches when your child is still 15 or 16? Seems that the most communication between player advisor and team parents are a little bit in the dark. When should we step up as parents to intervene? Okay, so I'll give you my thoughts, and Jen, you can jump in. So most of the communication, in my opinion, when your child goes to a place where they're essentially, let's not call it they're paid to play, but let's call it, it's essentially pro hockey. You're not paying, for the most part, big fees and dues, and they get free sticks. Once you get to a point where someone owns a team and brings your player in, it really is the time where that is probably the right time to have someone come in and advocate for your son. But what I would say is it goes back to suffering and struggling, or yes, the suffering versus the struggle, right? So, of course, hopefully we've got an open line of communication with you, the parents, and we're conversing. And if collectively we think there's more of a suffering than a struggling, I think that's when certainly we'll get involved and potentially even get you involved. But when it comes down to obviously the time on ice, the stats, the trades, the whatever the case might be, when you make that commitment to send your son to junior hockey, pro hockey, whatever that might be, that's where you've got to separate yourself. And the reason being is that there usually isn't too much emotion between agent and coach GM, because you're able to kind of remove yourself from that. But it's hard when you're a parent, because there is an emotional attachment to your kid. So I would say that if we feel that it crosses the line in any way, certainly, yeah, I think that we would probably urge you guys to get involved.
And yeah, this is actually a really great thing. And as again, the timing thing is actually quite important. Not just the timing of when something is said and then you intervene, but it's also the timing of when our athletes are telling us something about a situation. Our ability to sit and listen as they talk through all of the intricacies of it, we can ask for more information, such as like, can you give me an example of that? That's actually a really good way to have them say more. Any specific examples. And the more that they say, what's kind of interesting about it is that if we allow them to, they start to become their own problem solver. So that point of irritation that they're experiencing is oftentimes the point of their problem solving capabilities just waking up. So they're identifying a problem, and that's the irritation point. And it's a matter of allowing them to stay in the irritation of it a little bit longer, and allowing them to say more before we offer our opinion or our, yes, exactly. Like even our, not just our intervention at the GM level or the coach level, but our intervention in the conversation. Sometimes they just need to unload it all. And once they get it all out, what they've done is they've laid it all out for us. They've laid out, here are all the things that are happening. Because they said it out loud, they're looking at it more like a chessboard. Not that all of them are playing chess or anything, let's say like some video game instead, but it's all now laid out there for them. And they see it. And sometimes even in the middle of them talking about it, if we let them talk long enough, if we let them share long enough before we've added our opinion. And when I say opinion, that's not just words, that is, oh my goodness, my baby, like, or like that again, or, oh, that's hockey for you, like those types of things. Even before we provide that kind of feedback, let them say all of the things. And when they see it all laid out, because as athletes, they have been solving problems at very high rates of speed, they start to say the thing like, well, that part is out of my control. But you know what? Actually, so-and-so was telling me about his experience with this, and he's actually on the first line now. Like it is remarkable how much they are able to share if they're given the time to get the whole story out. And some of the things that we can watch and observe with them is their body language. And the reality is, when our kids first come to us, they're coming to us as nurturers at first, that like when they're talking about these things, they show up like that. And then they start to go through the shift. They start to notice their own behaviors, and they'll actually make an adjustment. And I do work with some of the kids of some of you that are on here, and I have witnessed this with your athletes numerous times, where I sit back and ask them to tell me more, or can you give me an example of that? And then they will, and then as they're giving the example, they actually start to solve the problem right there on the spot. And oftentimes I can tell that's actually time for the call to end. They start to feel more empowered. And I said almost nothing.
Any other questions that people might have? You can unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. We'll wait around for another, call it 5-6 minutes, see if anyone has anything. But otherwise, I appreciate everyone jumping on, and let's all get better. Yeah, it's something that with my, like when I'm having a conversation after, more pause, right? Letting them come to me and giving their opinions, right? Because at the end of the day, the only opinion that matters is theirs. Right? Yeah. It's just like, I can tell you play great, you don't feel that way. Right? Yeah. So you gotta feel it.
Yeah, and in many cases it is, and in my line of work, oftentimes the work involves getting their body into a better feeling place, and then they're more capable of being more critical thinkers and natural problem solvers.
Yeah.
It is a thing. So sometimes we have to identify what resource do they need, and do I need to be the one that provides it, or is it something they can provide for themselves?
And even now, what we're seeing in the NHL is guys sending out aptitude tests and stuff like that, where basically all they're trying to see is can you problem solve, right? So it's the talent thing is one thing, right? I mean, you're either going to get it or you're not. In the academies and skills coaches, it's all there to help. But really, at the end of the day, it's going to be if you want to be a third line center and you're 6'4", right-handed, can win draws and keep guys on the outside, you know, like it. But after that, then that's where you start to, it's like splitting hairs.
Yeah.
You know, with the character, with this problem solving, with the ability to, you know,
yeah,
adapt.
The ability to adapt.
Right, I mean, that comes all from problem solving.
And we can model that for them. Our powers of adaptation is something that they're watching. So before we let you go, we're just going to let you know about what that third T is that goes along with the supporting our athletes through transition, and that is how to stop terrorizing your kid. It's a tough one. I know that I've done it, and we can fill you in on what that's all about because we do look. The reality is we are very, very powerful and potent beings in our kids' lives. That is a reality. So our capacity to do great things is equally matched by our capacity to do harm. And sometimes the thing that we think we're doing to prepare our kids for something is actually terrorizing them. And I'll fill you in on what all of those markers are, how you know that they're actually being terrorized by us in some ways. And I use that word because that is the word that they use with me. That is,
no way.
Oh yeah, it's like that. Yeah, there's nothing worse as my own kid has done this, by the way. My own kid has referred to me as a terrorist. That is a thing that has happened because of the way that I've said things to her. And I'm like, ooh, that hurts, and I've got to learn from it. And then the athletes have said that as well. And they say it with a grain of salt, and they're being kind of cheeky about it, but their body language is telling me that when they go into terror, they actually go into shutdown mode, and we don't want them to be in that place. And there's one question that I'm going to send you off with, and this is around the trust piece. And that is, what is at risk for you as a parent to trust your kid?
That's a doozy.
It's a doozy.
Yeah.
What is at risk for you to trust your kid? And we'll leave you with that. And when we identify that, then we start to make the adjustments.
So what we're going to do is the second session is going to be on this topic, the transition topic, is going to be on September 6th, I believe. But you will definitely get an email before that time. And I want to thank Jen. Obviously, Jen's an expert in this. You can easily see that. She's helped. When I say helped, I mean, she's been critical to a lot of our players. I would say she passed 1,000. Everyone's kid on here is different. I've never met someone that can get through to everyone the way she has, and she is our secret sauce. So thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It's great to be part